Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 102 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In this episode, I interview Vanessa Ricci-Thode, who is a word sorceress, a fantasy author and fiction editor who loves a good story. She's a NaNoWriMo veteran and a bookish geek who loves dragons, superheroes, gardening, travel, and good tequila. We don't actually get into gardening, travel, or tequila, but we do talk about her love of writing and her editing, and a lot about her experience in NaNoWriMo, both as a writer and a community leader position that she has helping other writers with NaNoWriMo. Now, given that this episode is coming out October 25th, 2019, just a week before NaNoWriMo begins, I figured this would be an ideal time to share this interview. For anyone who doesn't know, NaNoWriMo is National Novel Writing Month, and the basic premise is taking 30 days and committing to writing 50,000 words in 30 days. Breaking that down, that would be the equivalent of writing 1,666 words a day. Somewhat manageable if you make the time for it. And Vanessa talks about all kinds of strategies and how she has done it so many times in the past and helps other writers do it. But before we get to that, I want to start with some of the recent comments that were left. Chad Boyer commented on episode number 100, which is the interview with Mark Dawson, and he says, I always have to remind myself not to compare where I am in my journey with where the heavy hitters in indie publishing are. I am grateful for your question about what to ask new writers. Up until that point, I was trying to find something to glean as a tip or trick of wisdom from Mark. I guess it boils down to the same thing. Keep writing. Finishing a novel 5 years ago is best, but finishing a novel now is the best you can do now. And Chad, I'm glad you said that, because when you're talking to an author like Mark Dawson, who is, 6-7-figure author and has already achieved that level of success that many of us aspire to get to, it can be challenging and frustrating. We suffer from comparisonitis, and it's difficult to think about where someone like Mark Dawson is and where we are in our writer journeys, because we're not all making 6 and 7 figures. And I think your attitude is bang on. Coming down to the keep writing, keep at it, persist, and continue working on your craft, continue working on those books. There was a recent study that I just saw, I think it was earlier today, and I'm recording this on October 23rd, and it was a post from Written Word Media talking about successful authors, and the authors making over 100K, authors making in the 60K range, and authors who are making less than that, and they call them emerging authors, sort of mid, and then the highly successful ones. And what were the things that they had in common? And a lot of it that had in common was a good number of books, like 20 or 30 books, and not necessarily all written fast. They just had a lot of books, so they had a big backlist. They also had mostly done professional editing at a particular level, and the study actually shares the dollars involved in the level. And again, professional cover as well. So when you think about that, keep writing lots of books, probably, and I don't think the stats get into series, but series I think do better, because once somebody gets hooked, they can really move through the series. We saw that with Mark Dawson. Professionally edited and professional covers. So just some of those qualities are some of the factors that can lead to that success. But again, I'm glad you made that comment, Chad, because it is important for us to not compare ourselves too much with where other people are on the journey. I prefer to try to compare myself with myself and where I was last year and the year before. And hopefully I've moved to a better place. Hopefully I have continued to write and produce new things. On Twitter, Harley Christensen said, Let's talk audiobooks. Mark Leslie and Kevin Tumlinson chat with Will Degas of Findaway Voices about production costs, finding and working with a narrator, deciding between exclusivity and going wide, and so much more via Draft to Digital, #audiobooks authors. Thank you, Harley, for sharing that. That was awesome. And this is just in reference to a webinar on October 17th that was done. And if you are a regular listener to the podcast, I actually took the audio from that and put it into episode 101, which I just stuck in the Fridays, in between the two Fridays of episode 100 and this episode 102. Also on Twitter, and this made me laugh, Lindsay Baroker said, on this week's Stark Reflections, Mark Leslie is talking to Paperback Writer, at Paperback Writer, which is Mark Dawson, and also explaining how he's not putting nearly enough effort into his Halloween decorations. And then, of course, she had a little smile emoticon there. That's hilarious, Lindsay. Yes, I know you were mocking me and making fun of the fact that I put way too much effort into my Halloween decorations. If only I put as much effort into writing more books. But thanks, Lindsay. That one made me laugh. And Lindsay Broker has a new podcast, if you haven't heard. I've been a huge fan of many of the podcasts that she has started, including way, way back when. But she just launched a new podcast recently called The Six-Figure Author, and I have been really enjoying the podcast, especially enjoying catching up on the learnings that her and Joe brought back from NINC in the latest episodes, and I'll have a link to that in the show notes. So thank you, as always, for your comments, whether it's on starkreflections.ca or on Twitter. And it doesn't matter how late you're listening to an episode, I do actually go back and check to see what the comments are, because there may be questions and things like that, and I hate to miss those questions. You can @ me at Mark Leslie on Twitter, or leave a comment at starkreflections.ca. This episode is sponsored by Findaway Voices. As you probably heard if you listened to episode 101, Findaway Voices is an audiobook platform where you can bring your ready-to-go audio and use them to distribute to the world's largest selection of retailers and library markets, where you can control the price in most of those markets. If you are looking to find and work with a narrator, Findaway Voices has over 4,000 professional narrators that they work with, and a project manager actually works to find you the best voices. There are different options. There are options where you can play completely up front and own all the rights, or there's also a voices share option where you can work with a narrator, pay half the hourly rate that they would normally do, and then split some royalties with that narrator. There is, of course, a buyout option if the book happens to be hugely successful and you want to keep all the royalties for yourself. So there is an option to get out of that as well. You can learn more about that if you listen to episode 101, where we talked to Will Degas of Findaway Voices. He is the head of Findaway Voices. Will actually happens to be the person who sent me those terrible tongue twisters. Findaway Voices has been a long-time sponsor of the show, and if you're a long-time listener, you may remember those embarrassing tongue twisters that I did, and I had so many requests from people who listen to the show who kind of got a kick out of it, but also tried to skip the tongue twister because it was just a little bit too silly. But that was Will, and you can learn more about Findaway Voices over in episode 101, because it's an hour long, all about audio and Findaway Voices, or you can check them out by going over to starkreflections.ca/Findaway. And in terms of a personal update, I signed up for NaNoWriMo. This episode is NaNoWriMo, so I thought I'd talk about that. But I'm not focusing on a single book for NaNoWriMo. I'm going to adapt NaNoWriMo into my own thing, and I'm going to use it to write 50,000 words for a number of different projects. Now, the first project is to finish a book that I actually started a couple of weeks ago. It's going to be the third book in my Stark Publishing Solutions series. I'm adapting the 2 podcast episodes that I did on working with bookstores and then with libraries, and it's going to be in a book entitled, wait for it, An Author's Guide to Working with Bookstores and Libraries. It'll be in the 15,000 to 20,000 word range, and it's planned for December. The cover is designed, most of the content is there, it just needs to be formalized and actually written out properly, then edited. So early November we'll be focusing on that, then it gets sent over to an editor so that I can do the rewrite, ideally in early December, and get it out early December. Now, mid to late November will be a cross between writing another 15,000 to 20,000 words on the Fear and Longing in Los Angeles book that I started and wrote 50,000 words of for NaNoWriMo a few years ago. Now, this is the second book in the Canadian Werewolf series. I recently wrote, over the summer, I wrote 23,000 words of a story that's going to become book 1.5 in the series. Now, my awesome editors for that, Deanna and Jamie, who this is going to be in an anthology that they're editing, and it's going to be published there first exclusively, and then after 6 months I'm going to release it as a standalone. But if you're dying to read it, you can always get it, and I will let you know when that's coming out, and it is going to be coming out soon. It is in their wonderful Monsters Anthology series. But they helped me refine that 23,000 words down into about 17,000 words. And it's still almost novella length. And that tale takes place a few months after the actions in the novel A Canadian Werewolf in New York. Now, Fear and Longing in Los Angeles will take place almost a year after that. And so working on this long short story and actually working with great editors like Jamie and Deanna was really inspiring, and it reinvigorated me into the world of Michael Andrews. So I thought, while I still have that steam, I want to get back into his universe, kind of pick up the pace and reread that and get right back into it so that I can write 10 to 20,000 more words in that universe. And there's another book in my Stark Publishing Solutions series that I've been working on, Indie Publishing Insider Secrets, but I've already put it off so many times, and I know it's going to be a much longer book, so I imagine I'll probably get about maybe 10,000 words or so done on that one, and I will be happy to get another 10,000 words done on that one and just get it a little bit closer to the finish line. So in a nutshell, I hope to track 50,000 new words of material in November 2019 from multiple projects. And I want to call attention to what I'm doing for NaNoWriMo. I'm using it as a tool to get writing done in a particular time frame, but I'm not locking it into a single project or book. Now, I think that by having multiple projects, I can move between the projects, and perhaps the chunking will help me see the end for each of those a lot closer, a lot clearer. I've never done this before, but I thought it might be a fun thing to try out so that I can at least get back into participating in NaNoWriMo, because I didn't do it in 2018, and I kind of missed that excitement and the tension and just looking at that charting to see, oh yeah, I did get 1,500 to 2,000 words done today. And I will let you know how I'm doing. And I'm curious to know, are you doing NaNoWriMo this year? I am very curious to know if you're doing that. I'd love to see if you're doing that in the comments about that at starkreflections.ca. Well, that's enough for the introductory matter for this podcast. Let's get right on to this interview with Vanessa Ricci-Thode. Hey, Vanessa, thanks so much for hanging out with me today.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
I'm not sure where to begin, but I think I have a bit of an idea.
Okay.
Because you're a multifaceted creative person. But I want to start with the fact that you are a NaNoWriMo veteran.
Mm-hmm.
So you've done it a number of times, and you've probably coached a lot of people through NaNoWriMo.
Yes.
Can we go back to the beginning of the first, if you can remember, your first NaNoWriMo and why you did it and what it was like for you?
Well, I started it. A friend of mine in university had done it a couple of years in a row, and she said, "Hey, this is fun. Let's give it a try." So yeah, let's give it a try, right? And I logged into the website, and 50,000 words in a month, the month of November, for those people unfamiliar with NaNoWriMo. And I said, sure, let's give it a try, and started reading all the tips. 50,000 in a month is a lot. Mm-hmm. So I said to my husband, I'm going to be doing this. I'll probably disappear for a month. Lots of takeout, lots of frozen dinners, lots of not watching TV, going to bed late. And I did it. I finished the entire first draft in the month, which was a little astonishing. And then having done that on my first try, I was hooked. So I've been doing it since 2006. I took 1 year off in 2012 because my daughter was wee, and it's hard to write that much with a small one.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something like you're not going to see your husband for a month, and you talked about no TV.
Hmm.
So is that because you found those times where you said, well, you know what, we sit down for an hour after dinner and we watch the show normally, or we binge something. Um,
Yes.
so what was that like? I mean, you had to fall out of the routine of what you did in the evening to get into the writing.
Hmm.
How did that work out? I mean, was he in the other room going, geez, I wish I could watch this show, but I have to wait for you? Or how did you manage that?
Oh, he was understanding, and he would just play video games on his own in the other room.
Okay.
And this was back before DVR or PVR or whatever it
So
was,
there
or
was no binge
Netflix.
watching, right?
And there was no binge watching. It was just still analog TV. So we used our VCR
Ooh.
and recorded all the shows that we normally watch. And we had a great
Oh,
big
okay.
long tape full of shows that we just sat down and watched them all in December.
Right.
And yeah, so we still watched everything. Just we waited until
Oh, you just
December.
delayed gratification.
Yes, yes, that was my
Okay.
reward for finishing the book. Was finally got to watch TV again.
Okay. So I mean, obviously you were working full time, right?
I
So
was part-time working and part-time student.
okay, but basically full time consumed by
Yeah,
all the things.
all the things.
So you had to find the time to write the 1,666 words somewhere in that day each day.
Yes.
Did you find any times that you slipped, missed a day, or
No, I'm pretty obsessive. So,
okay,
and they have those little widgets, that little graph that shows
yeah,
you how you're doing, and I didn't like it when I got behind the graph. So,
fair enough, fair enough. And so that was 2006. That was your first one.
yes.
Um, so you got to the end of it. Was it a project you had wanted to do for a while, or was it something you just said you just came up with when you signed up?
The idea had been floating around in my head. I didn't have an actual written down outline, but the outline was sort of in my head. I knew where it was going. It was about a side character from another book that I had written.
Okay.
So I wanted to explore her story, and that's what I did. It's still, I haven't touched it since. It needs a lot of work.
So
But
it was like you got the first draft out and went, oh, okay, on to the next thing.
yeah, yeah,
Okay. How many? So you did you missed 1 year when your daughter was a wee one.
yes.
Um, how many of those projects since I can't do the math. It's 2019. We haven't done November yet. Minus one. Oh, I can't do it. About
No,
10.
sorry, I can't help you either.
At least 10.
According to the NaNoWriMo site, I've done 12. I think this year will be my
Okay.
12th year
Okay.
participating.
All right, so 12
So
of them. So are most of them unfinished drafts? Like, is it just the exercise of practicing writing that you benefit from, or have you actually
oh
turned
no,
some of them into book projects?
all of them have been completed. So they're rough
Yeah.
drafts. Some of them are second, third draft. Some of my nano projects have been redrafting when I get to the end and realize this is crap, I need to rewrite it.
Okay.
Sometimes my nano is a rewrite.
Oh,
Um,
really? Okay.
yes, yeah. And then two of my nano projects are books that I have published.
Cool.
So the two books that I have out are both were written during NaNoWriMo.
Oh, that's fantastic. And can you
Yeah.
tell us what they are?
Okay. So the first one was written for my 2009, I believe, nano project. It's called Dragon Whisperer. It's about a young woman who is born immune to fire, and she's forced to work with dragons to keep the peace in her kingdom.
Oh,
The
sounds
second
like a
one,
appropriate job for her too, right?
yeah, she's made of fire. What do you immune to fire? What's she gonna do? Well, let's put her against dragons. So, um, so the second one was actually, it took 2 nanos to get it finished because I didn't have an outline, and I got about halfway through and I got stuck. I needed to make an outline and then finish it. But it's called After the Dragon Raid. It's fantasy. It's steamy. So it's about a female soldier who rescues a guy on a raid, and they fall in love, and then she finds out that he's not who he says he is, and there's lots of drama.
That never happens.
Never.
He's always what he says he is at the beginning, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. So you're planning on doing NaNoWriMo for 2019 as well, I imagine?
Absolutely, yes. I'm actually the ML in my region, which ML stands for Municipal Liaison. I am the local person on the ground setting up events and
Okay.
basically cheerleading the whole region. So
Cool. So how did you get into that? Like the ML and sort of, or the organization?
So the first time I came out to any events locally, the woman who was the ML at the time was fairly quiet. She was very sweet, but she was quiet, kind of introverted. I'm not an introvert. Maybe you noticed.
No.
So she had a hard time, especially some of the events got really big. We'd have 40, 50 writers in a cafe, and she's trying to, hey guys, we're going to play a game or whatever. And I would just yell really loudly, hey, pay attention. And she said to me, you're really good at this. You should help me next year. You should sign up to be an ML. And I did. And that's pretty much been it. I've been the ML, and I've lost count. I mean, I took that break, and it took me a year or so to get back into it, but I've been doing it ever since. So yes, I will be participating this year, as well as organizing the events locally.
So because you have a lot of experience in sort of supporting and helping a bunch of other writers that maybe it's their first time, are there a lot of first timers that come along each year? Or
Oh yeah, every year we get a couple people who have never done it before, just heard about it. Often they just hear about it towards the end of October, and they're like, well, I'll give it a try. And sometimes they don't have a plan and they're pantsing it. And so lots of word wars and encouragement.
yeah, I don't know what it's like not planning it in advance. I've never been in that boat. Uh, what's some of the common advice that you find helps these new people who've never tried it before?
Usually setting aside the time. Like I said, I told my husband I'm disappearing for a month, and he now understands he doesn't see me in November, and that's just sort of how our lives go now. But just making that time and explaining to friends and family, and guarding your writing time, and
Right.
maybe investing in a social media blocker and using it for the month.
Really?
I don't watch TV. So I
Okay.
just, give lots of tips on how to guard your writing time and make writing time.
Okay. And is there any advice for people like me that usually start strong? I go gung ho. I'm ahead of the curve the first few days, just going crazy, and then life hits you. And I
Yeah.
let life hit me,
Mhm.
and then I realize, oh no, I'm 20,000 words behind.
You
It's
can write
possible to catch up.
20,000 words in a day.
Really?
You can. Well, I don't know you personally, but I
Yeah.
do know people who have
Okay.
written. Last year, one of the writers was 20,000 words behind on the last day, and he just took the whole day. I think it was a Sunday, so it was,
And he just, oh,
he just sat down and he just wrote all day long.
right.
And it was right up to midnight, and he finally. I have an event that we run. It's called Mad Dash to Midnight. We go to a cafe that's open until midnight, and we sit and we write until midnight. And lots of people
Mad
come
dash to
alive.
midnight. Really?
Mad Dash to Midnight. I didn't start that event. I can't remember which ML did, but yeah, we've carried it on, and lots of people win right up to the last hour. So you've got lots of time.
Wow. So I have to say this because just in the last several weeks, I met way more writers from the Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge area that I didn't even know we had this many people, or even people that I kind of knew from the industry. And I went,
Yeah.
"Oh, you live here too?" So, where can local folks like me find out how to get to the chapter and find out what's going on, so they can get involved if they're interested in?
Okay, so there are NaNoWriMo regions all across the world. You just go to the website. It's nanowrimo.org. And there's a spot right on the screen where you can find your home region, and you just search by country, by province, right down to city level. And Kitchener-Waterloo has a region there. Last time I checked, there were close to 2,000 people homed in on our region.
Wow.
There are a lot of writers
Self-identified
here.
as writers and on NaNoWriMo, so not just
Yeah,
right. So
yeah.
it's got to be a
So there's
much
lots
bigger
more that
community.
don't do NaNoWriMo in this community. Yeah, there's a really rich literary community here that a lot of people don't realize.
I know, and I know you've been part of it for a while, and
Mhm.
I'm still new to it and getting my feet wet in this area. But what a wonderful opportunity! Now I want to spin things back even further to
Okay.
your entry into the world of writing, because
Okay.
NaNoWriMo was somewhere along the journme, but you've been writing
Mhm.
for a lot longer than that. When did it all start for you?
I started making picture books before I could actually use words. So um, I've been telling stories with pictures until grade one or whenever I learned how to write properly. And then I was making stories since then. So pretty much forever I've been writing something, telling stories in some way. I really started taking it seriously when I was about 13 or so.
Okay.
And I finished my first novel when I was 18, and it was terrible. And it's been one of the ones that I've rewritten several times. It's out on Query now. It's doing okay. Fingers
Okay.
crossed somebody picks it up. But yeah, it's the trunk novel I didn't give up on.
Okay.
But yeah, I've been writing for a long time.
So, considering how long you've been writing and your experience in the industry, right? You're aware of the way it was before the internet, and the
Hmm.
query process and finding an agent and selling short fiction. How has your approach to the writing industry changed as the industry has evolved, like especially in the last 10 years?
Yeah, there's been a huge boom. It's so much easier now with the internet. I didn't query and submit a lot back in the old days. We need to print it all off and put it in the mail and wait. Remember to do the SASE, and oh, do I have enough postage for that publisher down in the States? How does that even work? Um, Trying to go to the mail and explaining to them what that even is. Why do you want to send a letter back to yourself from New York? Uh,
I want to
so
get a rejection that way. You see.
yeah. Uh, so it's it's definitely so much easier to the access is easier, but I think it's also maybe made it a little harder. The competition is different because agents now get hundreds of queries a week, I think.
Right.
So you really have to stand out a lot more.
Okay.
But also, it's opened it up so that more people who maybe couldn't afford to send a manuscript to, I mean, it's a 200, 300-page manuscript and you're sending it into the States from Canada. That's a lot of money.
Yeah,
So,
that's true. Yeah,
yeah.
actually, when I think about the hundreds of dollars I spent on self-addressed stamped envelopes and well, getting photocopies because it would be typewritten, and you'd have to
Yeah.
make a photocopy and send the photocopy unless you wanted to keep typing the story over.
Which you really don't. So
No,
yeah, it's made it way more accessible, which is fantastic, and I think that's why we're seeing so many great stories right now. I'm really loving where the industry is right now, and hoping that we see more new voices coming out.
fantastic. And I mean, you've been passionate about words and storytelling. You were an indie publisher, when you were in kindergarten, making the little books. um,
Yeah.
but you also have a passion for editing.
Hmm.
And I know you're a member of editors associations, and you help people, you assist people as a professional editor.
Hmm.
How did you get into that?
I was actually looking for ways to be a better writer. My brother-in-law took a copy editing course through Ryerson University, and he was talking about it one day, and I said, "Oh, that sounds great. I should give that a try." So it was an online course that I could take, and the teacher, Catherine Dean, she was fantastic, and she lives in Guelph, and she's like, "Yeah, I edit in my pajamas while I watch the cows in my field because she lives on a farm that she rents out." And I was like, "Oh, you can do that. That's a life option, is it?" So sign me up, and that was how that got started.
Okay.
And I took more courses and I got involved with Editors Canada, and yeah, just learned a lot and got practicing, and then opened up shop.
So how long have you been editing for?
I officially opened my own freelance business in 2010,
Okay.
and I've been doing it mostly part time because my daughter was born in 2011. So
Yeah.
I was just getting going, and then so it's always been more of a side gig
Right.
just because parenting is my number one job right
Okay. And what kind of fiction do you edit? Like what's your preference? Is there a specialty that you fall into?
now. Oh, absolutely. I love editing sci-fi and fantasy and horror. Um, I've edited a lot of things, but those are definitely my preferences. And now I try to um, target writers who are in that field, in that genre, to say, "Hi, I love your work. Let me help you make it shiny."
So that's for example, if because you have limited time for editing, I imagine if you have a couple clients and one is a straight up literary memoir, and the other one's a speculative adventure tale
Yeah.
with magical stuff going on, you're probably going to go, yeah, I'm going to go with this one because I'll have more fun with it. Is it?
Yes, yes, that's definitely where I go. Because I've been involved with Editors Canada for so long, I do know lots of editors who will be happy to take that literary memoir piece. And that's often what I do is I'll say, you know what, this isn't right for me, but I have this colleague who would love this, and they'll do a great job. You should contact them.
Okay.
So I do a lot of referrals for things that I don't think I'm the right fit for, because people don't really think about it, but um, the different genres, you need to know your tropes and your expectations, and I do, and I don't know them for other genres, so I don't feel as comfortable. I don't think I could make the book as shiny as someone else who is more familiar could.
Right. What are some of the common things that you see with writers that you work with as an editor? What are some of the things that you're like, oh wow, I need to help them with this,
Yeah.
and I need to help them with that? What are two of the most common things?
Starting in the wrong spot is the number one thing that I see. Usually there's 3 or 4 chapters that are more the writer getting started and telling the story to themselves, is what I find.
Okay.
And from what I've heard from a lot of editors and even other writers giving advice, is, yeah, usually those first 3 or 4 chapters don't need to be there. And that's what I usually say is, this is all great. It's well written. It's kind of interesting, but your story doesn't really start until here.
Okay. That's cool.
And I mean, with the self-publishing the way it is, if you really really like those first chapters, you rework them into a short story or something, but they don't always fit with and it's a pacing issue too. All those chapters where your main character wakes up and eats breakfast and goes to school and then gets into the fight with the bully, and that's where the story starts. You need to start already at school, maybe like 5 minutes before they run into the bully.
Right.
And that's sort of the thing that I see the most, is a pacing issue. Pacing issues in general are the really big one that I see the most. And then the other thing is probably just overall skill. Sometimes I get writers who come in and they're looking for editing and they haven't, it's a first draft. And I'll say, you probably should practice a little more, get a critique group. Critique groups are great because I can help you take a first draft, but editing isn't free. So
Okay. Yeah, fair
critique
enough.
groups are free, and they can help you learn your craft, and you learn a lot more critiquing others too than you do just getting edited. So
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because then you get exposure to different styles, and
yeah,
is it easier to see? I guess it may not be easy to see the nuances you fall into, but it may be able to see the exact same thing in someone else.
yes, yeah. I've personally, as a writer, I found that a lot. That I've learned a lot about myself in writers in my own writing, just seeing the mistakes that other people make, and even as an editor, it's easier to see the errors in someone else's work. But then once you learn how to spot them, you can see them everywhere. That's why I definitely recommend critique groups, especially to newer writers. If it's your first book and maybe you haven't put anything out yet, yeah, definitely join a critique group.
Cool.
It's really valuable.
I guess maybe becoming a part of a local NaNoWriMo group may be a chance to sort of get your butt in gear to get the writing done, and maybe even meet other people where you can find out, oh, are you part of a local group? Is this something I can participate in? Is that a good way for people to find local groups?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, definitely. The one group that I crit with the most is definitely they're friends that I made during NaNoWriMo, and we hang out all year long, and we will swap short stories or beta read each other's manuscripts, critique query letters, because a few of us are into the query stage now. But yeah, we all met through NaNoWriMo, and I know there are a couple of other groups that do the same. There's one that meets in the Adventurers Guild Board Game Cafe. I think they're every Tuesday, and they started through NaNoWriMo, and they meet every Tuesday, and they either write together or they critique each other. There's a group at Cafe 1842 that meets every Monday night. So
Wow.
those are the ones I know about.
Wow.
I'm sure there are more.
Every night of the week, I bet you there's at least one or two in almost most cities, right?
Probably, yeah. The challenge is finding them. I
Yeah.
think some of them, the libraries can often assist in helping you find a writers group too.
Oh yeah, library is always a great resource. So for your own writing, I mean, I imagine you do a lot of it solitaire, right? Solo, where you've got some time when the family is occupied elsewhere. But then you also do stuff in cafes. Do you find you're more productive when you're in a setting where there's other people like just banging on the keys, or do you prefer to be like self-contained, with the headphones on, focused on it solo?
For a non-introvert, I definitely work better at home. I get too distracted when I'm around
Really?
people. I just want to talk to everybody
You don't want to
because
write, you want to chat
I,
with them.
I want
Okay.
to chat with everybody. So I definitely get more work done at home, which is a challenge come November because 50,000 words in a month, and I do all of the events. I'm at them all,
Oh, wow. Yeah,
and
because yeah, as an ML, you're pretty much you're the leading the groups, right?
yeah. So I have to be there and spend most of it cheering other people on. So I don't write a whole lot in the cafes. Mostly I'm helping people, chatting with them, making sure they're writing, administering word wars, and not getting a lot of writing done myself. So most of
Wow.
my writing gets done in the evening after my daughter goes to bed.
Okay. So wait a second. You're at the event that's there to help writers sit down and pound out the 1,600 words, and
Yes.
then you have to go home and do the 1,600. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. I make them do their words, and in the process of doing that, I don't get my own done. So
Oh, that's
the
fantastic.
write-ins aren't. I do get a bit writing done when there's word wars. If there isn't something else that I need to be doing, then I will sit in word war with them. But that doesn't always get me my words.
So what are you looking most forward to for this coming November and the month of fun that is ahead?
It's just great seeing people. There are people in this region who have been coming out to events and doing the events for as long as I have, and usually November's the only time I see them. So I have November friends, and it's always great to see them. And the new faces, there's always new people coming in and helping them get their stories written.
That's fantastic. Now you have resources for writers on your website as well. Can you tell me a little bit about those?
Yeah, I have links to various writers group like the Writers Union of Canada and Canadian Authors Association, where to find different editors, um, different associations like that, a list of books to help with self-editing or planning or querying, just the process from start to finish, websites that are really, really helpful that I found useful in my own writing and planning and plotting,
Excellent.
revising,
And what
rewriting.
and what is your website? What's the URL for that?
It's www.thodestool.ca,
Like Toadstool.
like
Like somebody who
toadstool.
writes fantasy.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Now, last question is I want to go back to the young Vanessa who was making those little books, those
Okay.
little booklets, and dreamed of one day being a writer. What's the advice you would either go back and tell young Vanessa, or advice that you would say to somebody who's listening and said, "Yeah, I've always wanted to do NaNoWriMo, or I've always wanted to write a story or a novel." What sort of advice would you share with them?
Make the time and don't give up.
Cool. You made it sound so easy.
It's so not easy. It's so difficult, but being stubborn helps a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, just pushing through. It's not easy. It takes time. It's
Are there
frustrating.
examples of how stubbornness has helped you achieve some of the goals?
Uh, well, querying right now. I'm up to, I think it's 43 rejections now on this book that I have out. So it's just stubborning through it and saying, well, that wasn't the right agent. Maybe the next one will be.
I love that term, stubborning through it. Sounds like a book you can write for writers.
Yeah, yeah, maybe.
Oh man. Well, Vanessa, thank you so much for taking the time to share some of your insights, your wisdom, and your stubborning with me.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
As always, I'm so inspired by the people that I talk to for the podcast, and Vanessa said so many things that were really inspiring. I want to start with the concept of NaNoWriMo and the concept of sitting down and committing to 50,000 words and doing it in a public fashion, like signing up and putting your neck out there and saying, I'm going to try to get 50,000 words done. I want to remind you, if you're getting frustrated and have maybe tried it and have not made it all the way through, I want to remind you that my novel, A Canadian Werewolf in New York, which came out in 2016, I started it in 2006 and I only got 30,000 words done. But I got 30,000 words done. It took me 10 years before I finished it. And then I finally got it out. I also have A Fear and Longing in Los Angeles for 2017, which I got 50,000 or so words done. But it needs to be about 70,000 words, and I'm not finished with that book yet. And there's so many times that I have gotten not the 50,000 words done, but I have gotten something out of it. And committing to those words, even if you try NaNoWriMo and you only get 500 words done, maybe that's the first 500 words that you've done on a book, and congratulations. Think about what you've achieved. Think about what you've accomplished, not what you haven't done yet. And the whole idea of NaNoWriMo is to just try to give you a deadline and some tension and some motivation, or even some people in the community that you can go and sit with and maybe be inspired by them. And just sometimes being with your peers, talking to people is important. Now, I do a lot of one-on-one consultations, both personally, but also we do free one-on-one consultations with authors from Draft to Digital. At the end of our webinars, we sort of open up some spots and people can book half an hour just to talk to us about anything. And I had a writer that I spoke to this week, and it was kind of neat. He didn't have any specific questions like how to do this or how to do that or what do you think of this marketing. He is in a community where there aren't a lot of people around, and he just wanted to talk writing. And so it was this amazing half hour of just the two of us talking writing, and that was so cool. But I remember that not every writer has that community, not every writer has that opportunity. And so NaNoWriMo is an opportunity for you to connect with other writers. So if you don't have anyone to talk to about writing because nobody in your family or your close friends or whatever understand what it's about, sometimes that local NaNoWriMo community, even if you can't get the 50,000 words done, just connecting with people in the community is important. Vanessa talked about that as one of the critical aspects she's looking forward to. She has her November friends, she calls them. Those are the kindred spirits who are in there and doing it. And year after year, they're still back there. And that kind of leads to the next thing, is that year after year. And Vanessa talked about querying agents. And I have to go back to my notes to look at this. She said 43 rejections. And she talked about the importance of stubborning through it. You probably still remember that because it was just at the very end of the interview where she talked about that. And that's critical in my mind, stubborning through it. Whether you're stubborning through the 50,000 words or the 100,000 words or whatever it is that you need to do, the rewrites, the editing, whether you're stubborning through all the rejections, whether you're stubborning through the fact that there are going to be 1-star reviews or no reviews because nobody has read it yet, is that persistence and consistency is critical for long-term success as a writer. So the question I have for you is, are you writing NaNoWriMo this year? Are you participating in NaNoWriMo this year? Is there anything you're doing uniquely or differently this year based on previous experiences? Or is this your first time? Would love to hear about that in the comments for this episode 102 at starkreflections.ca. And are there ways that you stubborn through things? So if you want to talk about or leave a comment about stubborning through it and your reflections on that, I would love to hear your reflections on NaNoWriMo and your reflections on stubborning through it. Speaking of audience participation, I have not, in several episodes, given a shout out to the amazing patrons of the Stark Reflections podcast. These are the folks who support the show for as little as $1 a month. It's $1, $3, or $5 a month. And I just wanted to give a shout out to the patrons of the show. I really do appreciate what you're offering by ponying up a little bit of money to help support the podcast. This does help go towards upgrades in equipment, and there is another upgrade in equipment I'm going to be getting soon, a stabilizer for the mic. So sometimes I hit it and you can hear a weird vibration. Just want to get that a little bit more professional quality for you listeners, because I think you deserve the best quality professionalism as possible. And I will be purchasing books from guests that come on the show, or different opportunities where I can share back to the writing community. And that is all courtesy of the generosity of you amazing patrons. And you can check out how to become a patron and the extra content you get as a patron, which will be additional audio, additional text content, and sometimes additional video content. You can learn about that over at patreon.com/starkreflections. Well, that's it from me for this episode. As I finish recording this, I am going to finish packing my bags. I'm going to be heading to Las Vegas, where I'm going to be teaching alongside Dean Wesley Smith and Christine Catherine Rush for the WMG Business Masterclass of Publishing. It is basically from October 25th through the 30th. I am so looking forward to returning to there, because not only do I get to be on stage and do a lot of different sessions and panels and presentations, but I get to learn so much, because we never stop learning about this business. And that's probably why you are a reflective and why you listen to podcasts like this, because you're constantly seeking and learning and growing, just like I am. Again, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre. Thank you so much for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. Until next week and episode 103, here's wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.